Hi everyone, my name is Dave Cranberg and I'm the Executive Director of Meal Exchange, a national charity that works with over 10,000 student volunteers every year to alleviate hunger locally and achieve food security. Over my 15 years of being involved with the organization, we organize a lot of different events, and volunteer recognition has become a central piece of what we do. So I'm here to share some of the pieces that I've learned along the years around coordinating a successful volunteer event. So volunteer recognition, an effective volunteer engagement program, acknowledges volunteers by providing meaningful recognition throughout the year. So while I'll be talking about a specific event, I'll also try to give some tips and tricks about how you follow through with that throughout the year so that the people that really make the work possible for our organizations are recognized year-round. And it's essential that the leadership of the organization acknowledges internally and publicly the importance of volunteers in the organization. So I'll talk a bit more about that. I've organized today's presentation to just talk in general about volunteer recognition, social media and how we can be using that to do a better job of it, actual event coordination, and then some follow-through tips and tricks. So we know that volunteers contribute over 2 billion hours each year in Canada, and that the entirety of the work accomplished by the nonprofit sector would not be possible without them. They're an integral part of how we accomplish our missions. And if you talk to any fundraiser, often in grant applications, we're asked to include the in-kind contributions, including volunteer hours. And sometimes the monetary value is asked to put to this. And so even if we just put minimum wage value to this, like we know that the actual dollar figure of what people are contributing is immense. So now think about your organization and think about how many volunteers assist you. How many board members, committee members, event organizers, one-time supporters, students, etc. There's think of all the different types, and how many hours do they contribute? Estimate. And now, even though that we know that doing so is not in part not in the spirit of our work or the person's motivations for volunteering, what if you assigned a dollar figure to this contribution? Now, what I'm betting is that the theoretical value of their contributions is greater than some of your largest financial contributors. So and we recognize our donors through a lot of, fun and interesting ways, with title sponsorships at events, logos and names on website, annual reports, special naming rights, and more. So what I'm proposing is that we do the same for our volunteers year-round. And in the same way that when you report to donors, you don't just tell them how the money was spent, you focus on why it was important that the money was spent this way, the impact. Let's do the same with our volunteers. Focus on impact. People are happy to volunteer, to work a table or stuff envelopes, but what is the impact? If you're able to relate how that act of volunteering relates to the overall mission and vision of your organization, then the generosity of volunteers, as shown by the numbers, is impressive, but their impact is even more so. Make impact the focal point for your recognition, whether it be at an event or year-round. So now with the numbers and impact in mind, start thinking about what you could do for an event that would actually be a creative way to recognize people. What I'd like you to get to think about is how do you make them the stars, not the organization. Oftentimes at events we mix purposes. We want it to be educated, we want to include education, fundraising. We want to talk about the organization's mission. What I'm really encouraging you to do is focus on the volunteers. Make them the stars, because the nonprofit sector thrives on relationships. By focusing on the people that make our work possible, you're going to amplify the organization's culture and make it the type of place where people are excited to spend their time. And I think we often also forget that when someone chooses to contribute their time with us, that it means that they're not spending their time on any number of other things. These are people with jobs, families, social lives, and much more. And I believe that successful volunteer recognition takes into account that not only are they tremendous volunteers, but they're also tremendous individuals. So celebrate someone's other accomplishments, life's milestones and successes. So tell the story of your volunteers in the same way that you would tell the stories of the people you serve or the donors who contribute the funds. Put them on the center stage for an event, literally, as keynote speakers, as MCs. If you're presenting awards, have volunteers present them. Talk about why it's so impressive that someone else impressed them as another volunteer. The other thing to consider is often we recognize the outstanding contributions of a handful of extraordinary individuals with an Of the Year award, but we know from our volunteer mathematics that there are actually a lot more people. So think about time served awards. Um, recognize that consistency is important to your organization's success. So if someone's been, involved with you for 5, 10, 15 years, like recognize that. That's an amazing commitment to your organization's mission. Now, once you have some ideas about the ways in which you'll recognize people at an event, think about how you can incorporate these into the build-up and promotion of the event. So if you're presenting an Of the Year award or Time Served award, um, think about how you could profile some of those stories in the promotion or a press release or a public service announcement leading up to it. And think about how you can continue that recognition afterwards. And lastly, I'd really like to encourage you at the event itself, think of the fun ways to get people interacting and meeting all of the various folks that make your work possible. The most fun thing of any event is the opportunity to meet other people. And if you're like many nonprofits, there's not many opportunities to bring together all of your different stakeholders, donors, partners, clients, partners, friends, everybody. I look at these opportunities as an exciting way to be like, wow, wouldn't it be great if a volunteer is talking with a board member, talking with a donor, talking with somebody from a partner organization? How do I make this possible? How do I get them talking so that they have a great experience? And, your network becomes even more vibrant. So one idea that I've used in the past that I found fun, and fairly simple to run is volunteer bingo. Simply create, a 5x5 grid or a 10x10 grid, hand it to people when they check in. And on that grid are things like, find someone who, is a board member, find someone who is a monthly donor, find a volunteer who has been with the organization for 5 years, find a volunteer who recently got married. Make it a mix of commitments to the organization and then also celebrate the person's, ways in which people can tell their personal stories, because they're more than just what they contribute to the organization. You do that as a little mix and mingle, and soon enough people are talking. They're like, oh, I met so-and-so at this event. They're a volunteer. It just builds those relationships. And again, the nonprofit sector is about relationships. I had to throw this slide in here because it's fairly recent. Meal Exchange in 2004 found this amazing volunteer who's been helping us out in the 8 years since as a volunteer graphic designer. And anytime someone says, wow, you guys develop some amazing creative materials, promotional materials, how do you do it? And I go, well, it's all volunteer. We don't pay for graphic design. There's just somebody who it's their passion and they help us out. And so in 2007, when we did our first volunteer recognition event, official one, where we presented some Volunteer of the Year awards, we presented this person with the Volunteer of the Year award for the amazing stuff that they've been doing. And we focused on the impact. Hey, it's great that he'd been contributing so much time, but the real impact of that was on how, his creative marketing materials drew in more people and led to the success of events. And then just recently, and this is part of that follow-up and year-round recognition, he had his first child, so we just posted it on Facebook and, celebrated it, and our network went wild with it. They were posting it, they were liking it. It was so much fun, and, it's just a fun way to celebrate the fact that, yeah, we love him for what he contributes to the organization, but he does a lot of other things, and father is one of them. So I encourage you to think of different ways you can do that. These days, technology is providing us with another venue for events, the online world. So I'm going to talk not just about how we can use social media to promote and to recognize volunteers, but also plant the seed of an idea of another way of doing an event, and that's an online event. Because if you're an organization like Meal Exchange or like any number of others, you're spread out geographically, and your volunteers, could be all over the province, all over the city, all over the world. So what's an interesting way to bring them together to recognize them and get them mix and mingling with one another? And social media is definitely the way to do it. But before I get to that, regardless of whether or not your event is going to be a live in-person event or online, most people these days are social. They're social animals. They're loving all of the Facebook, the Twitter, Pinterest is a new one, Google+. The list goes on and on. And so if you remember how I said to make volunteers the star of the show, social media is one great way to do that, and it reaches out beyond just the physical event that you'll be organizing. So here are some When it comes to RSVPing for an event, I really recommend checking out Eventbrite or something similar. You know, if it's a free ticketed event, then the cost is nothing to you. And when people sign up online, they can immediately share it to Facebook, you know, with a tag that says, I'm attending so-and-so's organization event on this date. So it's a great way for them to share with their network the fact that they're going to a volunteer recognition event. And, you know, if there's, say, somebody receiving an award or time served or anything else, they're able to include that too. It's like, hey, I'm attending this because I'm receiving an award. And it's just a great way to build, like, to put them front and center. A Facebook event I highly recommend. And then include a Twitter hashtag. If you're not sure what that is, it's simply a pound sign before some sort of tagline that anybody who uses it can search everything else. And it's a great way to get people like interacting with one another and build some buzz in the Twitterverse beforehand. The other idea I'd like to throw out there, a meme is kind of like a viral internet fad. Could be a video, an image, anything like that. You see them in your Facebook feeds. If you go to knowyourmeme.com, they actually kind of track all of these things, and it could be a fun way to, you know, use the latest internet trend viral fad to help promote your event, recognize volunteers. So play around, have fun with it, be creative. Now back to the idea of an online event. A couple things that we've tried a few times now are Twitter parties, and that's really when you promote it, you publicize it, you invite people to it just like you would a real event, but instead of coming to a physical location, they're all signing online wherever they are and logging into their Twitter feeds and following a central account that could pose questions, you know, or you could like post some interesting quotes and they're commenting on it. They're writing to one another, all using that hashtag. That's how they're all part of the same conversation. So think about ways to do that. You can have door prizes and things like that to encourage participation. And the nice thing is you can see it. It's like an online conversation. It would be like if you're actually at an event and able to track every single conversation that's happening. It's pretty wild, pretty intense, but it's a really fun way for those for anybody who is tech savvy and loves their Twitter. It's a fun way to get them involved. So that's in the pre and post and thinking of ways that you could actually use social media in your, like in the lead up to the event. At the event itself, definitely use a hashtag. Anyone who loves their technology is going to want to tweet about it, you know, share it with their social network. Make sure that you have that promoted somewhere. Oftentimes at an event, they'll mention it once and then I forget what the hashtag is, so I'm not using it, and you know, nobody's relating what I'm sharing with the world back to this event, back to your organization. The other thing to keep in mind is that social media posts that include a photo are more likely to be seen rather than just, say, a status update or a single tweet. So, you know, encourage people to take photos and actually designate, you know, a certain person from your team to take photos, you know, and post them on Facebook as the event is happening. All right, so now that I've shared some tips and ideas around volunteer recognition and use of social media for volunteer recognition, I'd like to share some of the basics of event coordination so that if it's your first time planning an event, or even if you're a seasoned expert and just want some tips about how to include volunteer recognition into it, I'll go through the steps that we often use on how to really plan a successful event. We break it out into 4 stages. There's the plan, which is about creating your team that's going to help make this thing happen, setting your vision and goals, and designing the event itself. Then there's the preparation, which are the nitty-gritty details such as budget, timeline, and who's responsible for what. There's the promotion, so it's the invitations, it's getting the word out in media and social media, and finally the actual execution of the event, you know, the 24 hours leading up to it, and everything to think about as you're coordinating it. So the very first step, when you decide, hey, we want to host an event, is to actually define the vision and set the goals. Now we know the purpose of this one is volunteer recognition, and often we like to bake in other aspects such as education about our issue. We want to promote a new service that we might be running, networking between different people that are there. It could be fundraising. I'd like to challenge you, because I think it's something that we do quite often in the nonprofit sector, is that we try to do accomplish 5 or 6 things with one event. So I'd like to challenge you to identify the primary purpose, which I'm going to assume is volunteer recognition for this one, and select 1 or maybe 2 secondary goals or purposes. Keeping it simple, because the more purposes you try to bake into an event, there's an increased lack of clarity for anybody attending. So if someone attends, they're thinking, wow, I thought I was just going to see, volunteers be recognized, but instead it was a fundraising event and I was being asked to donate and all of this. And I know that your donor, or the people working in your fundraising department, are really going to encourage you to incorporate fundraising into any event that you participate in. Our philosophy is that if you do a really successful recognition event and make it part of your culture that you recognize and value everybody that contributes, that the fundraising will happen after that. Invite your donors to that so they see it, and they're more likely to feel connected to your organization and to your cause. So the second piece of this is the who should attend. And with volunteer recognition, I think you should treat it as if it's your most important event of the year. So you invite all of the stakeholders that you would to anything else. Think about it that if it was a major donor that you're recognizing, or somebody who's been involved with the organization for 25 years, a retiring executive director or founder, that you would invite out anybody and everybody. Do the same for your volunteers, and because it sends a signal to them that their contributions are as important as anything else that the organization is doing. Think about your budget, think about the size and the scope of the activity itself, and then the final piece is how long you want it to be. Is it you want everybody there for 1 hour? Do you want them for an entire evening and a day? Setting the tone of that, deciding on the length, will also influence your budget and some of the details that follow. The second stage of event coordination in the planning phase is forming a team. Now, when it comes to volunteer recognition, your team would normally consist of volunteers, but in this case, these are the people that you want to recognize. So in the ideal situation, you're going to treat it like Mother's Day, where the kids prep breakfast for mom while she lies in bed. But in this case, it would be ideal if the staff of the organization plan the event and volunteers get to relax and take no part in the coordination of it. Now, if you're like most organizations, that's not going to be feasible, so you're going to need to rely on volunteers to help out, and that's totally cool. Just obviously be sure to recognize them at the event and thank them for everything that they did to make the volunteer recognition event happen. When it comes to forming the team, I encourage you to get a diverse view of perspectives. So if you are going to invite a bunch of different stakeholders like donors and clients and volunteers and alumni, have them represented in the planning team as well, so that you're making sure that they understand what's happening and that things that you might not consider, are being incorporated into the event. The other piece is mixture of personality types. I'm a creative type, and I really do well when there are those people that love the organizational plan, like they want to see the task list, and they like to color code it. You can have logical people, empathetic people, but try to get a mixture. Don't just recruit a bunch of people who also think like you do, because it's just going to be, if you're all creative types who love big ideas, there's going to be lots of big ideas and nobody actually helping to organize that so things get done. And lastly, set the terms of reference, just like you would for any other group that you convene. How often are you going to meet? What's expected of the team members? How often will you communicate between meetings? Set those expectations so that anybody involved in the planning understands the time commitment and what's expected of them. Then the fun part. Start planning the event. And I am a believer that anything an organization does is an extension of that organization's brand and culture. And for me, brand is how people relate to you and your work. What feeling do they get when they think of your organization? So I think it's really important at this point to consider how you incorporate your vision and mission and values into the culture of the event. So things such as the location, the vendors, the food, the beverages, the gifts should reflect your values. I've provided a website there, sustainable.org, for things to consider if you want to coordinate the sustainability of the event, everything from how to reduce waste to selecting green vendors. People take notice of these things. Meal Exchange is a food organization, so people expect, that we've given careful thought and consideration to any of the food that we're serving, and, if there's an opportunity to do business with a social enterprise, then we're expected to do so. otherwise we're not living our mission. People really want to see us doing that throughout. The other piece of designing the event is the theme for it, and the tagline and the tone. Events can be serious, they can be fun, they can be laid back, they can be formal. Think about all of these things. Graphic designers will tell you that there's colors associated with all of these tones and feelings, so talk to them about, how do we convey the message, and the atmosphere we want to create at this event with our color scheme. And you can go off the color scheme of your organization. And the final piece of all of this is drafting up the itinerary for the event itself. It doesn't need to be down to the wire, knowing exactly what's going to happen every minute, but the rough idea of are we going to have speakers? Do they speak at the beginning or at the end? When do people mingle? Start coming up with those ideas so that as the committee gets more organized, they can start fleshing them out. So now that you have an idea of the tone, venue, and all of these pieces, it's time to start getting people organized. And because you're doing it with a diverse group of people, I encourage you to use a simple template that is a task list that identifies the tasks involved, the budget, the due date, and the person responsible. Really simple. There's more there's sophisticated things out there like Gantt charts and project plans. You can make it as sophisticated as you want. But the idea is that there's something that keeps you all on track and all on the same page, because events, there's one person tracking down a venue, another person is sending out the invites, another person is doing the promotion, and your job as the event coordinator is to keep all of this organized and help people understand that the work that they're doing over here is related to somebody's work over there. And so a piece that I found useful these days is using technology, so cloud software. A couple of really simple ones, Google Docs, you can easily share it, make it available to anybody with the link, so it's as simple as them clicking on the link just like they would a web page, and boom, they can see the entire list of what everybody's up to, what the progress is on, hey, do we have that venue booked yet? What about the caterer? Have we sent out the invites? Have we sent out the reminders? How many people have RSVP'd? So anybody that's wondering about these things as the event approaches and it becomes more real in everyone's mind, people checking in have that peace of mind, and it decreases your workload of having to respond to a bunch of emails about what's the status of this, what's the status of that. You can just say, go to this link. Everything you need to know is right there. So when it comes to the guest list and invitations, again, as I said before, treat it as though it's the most important event that your organization holds each year. So identify those donors, the partners, the clients, the alumni that signal to your volunteers that this is a high-profile and highly important event. I believe this lends itself to the organization's culture, that you value the people who contribute their money, their time, their expertise to help you achieve your mission, and that builds a greater affinity to the work that you do and builds lifelong supporters. And just like anything, if you're planning an event, you want to give people as much notice as possible. People's calendars fill up extremely fast these days, so if you can send a save the date, email, notice, whatever, to these people 1 to 3 months in advance, so that they've at least registered it on their radar and put it in their calendars to say, oh yes, on that Saturday or on that Tuesday evening, I have this event. You want to send them the official invitation at least 3 weeks in advance. Now, you can consider whether or not you want to segment your invitation list, and segmentation means that, say your donors would receive a different invitation than the volunteers themselves. The donors might receive something that says, dear so-and-so, we'd like you to once again help our organization as we recognize the amazing volunteers that support our work throughout the year. As one of our donors, we think that your presence at this event would be of tremendous value. So that could be one script. The second script that could go out to the volunteers is, hey, to thank you for all of your hard work and tireless efforts in supporting the work of this organization, we would like to invite you out to this event where we'll be recognizing some of the people that have been with us for 5, 10, 15 years and give out some of the year awards, or just whatever the purpose of the event is, a mix and mingle. You can segment your list, send out different invites so people are going, oh wow, I'm understanding it. The one-size-fits-all approach is becoming less and less common as there's an expectation that we're more savvy with the use of e-newsletters and things like that to create tailored messages. final piece is sending out that reminder 1 to 5 days in advance, and that's just because even if I've put it in my calendar, because you sent me the save the date and I RSVP'd, using your official invitation, something could come up, maybe I wasn't paying attention properly. I didn't actually put it in my calendar. I just made a mental note of it. Send me that reminder so that I go, oh yeah, I've got that thing tomorrow night, or I've got that thing on Saturday night. The other piece I'd encourage you to consider is how to use some free online software like Eventbrite or something similar, because the tickets are $0 for this event, and I encourage you to think about that. Cost recovery is okay, but trying to make a profit off of volunteer recognition, I caution you against that. Free tickets, if the tickets are free on Eventbrite, it's $0, and the other nice thing is that instantaneously people can RSVP, but they can also share their RSVP on social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, which is another way to promote not just them, but also your organization, because how cool would it be if a volunteer is saying, hey, I just RSVP'd to so-and-so's, event on Saturday, where they're going to be recognizing their volunteers for their outstanding commitment. And that's going out on their Facebook, and all of their friends are seeing it, and seeing that you as an organization really value volunteers. And a common theme in this is singing the praises of your volunteers as loudly as you would a major gift or any other accomplishment of the organization. So in terms of promotion of the event, even if the general public is not invited or not able to attend because of the size and venue restrictions, utilize the media, send it out on public service announcements in the radios and newspapers to say that because of the outstanding commitment of volunteers, you are hosting this event for them where you'll be recognizing such and such a volunteer for their lifelong commitment, or you'll be presenting so-and-so with the Of the Year award. If you have lined up a prominent speaker, and I encourage you to maybe think about using some of your volunteers here as a prominent speaker to talk about why they value volunteering with your organization. Profile that as well in your media release, and then of course invite the media to actually attend the event, do some photo ops with any of the special things that you're doing, anything to get the word out about the event itself and the work the organization does is a positive thing. So one of the final stages is the execution stage, and that's where you're thinking about all of the entertainment that people could be doing, like everything that's happening, their entire experience from the moment they walk in the door to the moment that they leave is the execution phase. And the number one thing at any conference that people comment on when, like if they're filling out some sort of survey or feedback on how an event went or how do they like this workshop, is the food. They always comment on food. So I encourage you to have food regardless of the event. It can be simple little, table vegetable platter, or it can be more elaborate with a sit-down dinner, but think about asking local businesses for donations or to cater, and again, ensure that food and beverages are reflective of the organization's culture so that you're living your mission. If you are a social service agency, a food advocacy agency, an environmental organization, really consider how food and beverages can reflect that, by working with local and sustainable producers or social enterprises, anything like that that signals to people that you live your mission every single day is a good thing. And then make the experience about your guests. Like really think from start to finish what they're going to be experiencing. And that's why I suggested that the people that help plan it are representative of the people who will be attending, so that they can provide that perspective as, as a client, this is what I'd hope to see and experience in an event. As a board member, this is what I'd experience. And the number one thing that people enjoy at an event is the networking and the mixing and the opportunity to meet all of the other people that make your work possible. If you're like most organizations, it's really rare to have everyone in one place together. So make use of that and get people talking with one another. An idea that I've suggested before and that I really, really like is the idea of volunteer bingo. Really simple. As people check in, you hand them a card, and on that card are things like, find someone who has volunteered for 5 years, find a board member, find a volunteer who, recently got married. make it a combination of how that person relates to your organization and pieces of that person's personal life, so that you can recognize that in addition to your organization, they do a lot of other things in their life, so that you get people mixing. Again, on the execution, it's really important to think through every little detail from when they first walk in to that welcome table, name tags, some way of identifying people, some way of getting people to talk, line of sight to any speakers and entertainment, so that, you're not in that awkward position of having to crane your neck to see something if it is a sit down. Another little tip that I find really helpful are, if it's anything where it's tables or chairs, you put the reserved signs at the back. What that does is force everyone to get closer, to wherever the entertainment and action is happening. And it just keeps the back of the room open, and you can remove those signs later on if you need to. The other thing, when it comes to the actual execution, it's great to have a plan, a detailed itinerary. You want to make sure that everyone who's helping out understands where they have to be and what's happening and when, and where they need to help out, if it's setting up with AV or doing this or anything, like when the food comes out and the role that they have to do there. But realize that even the best event planners realize that things are not going to go as planned. You can plan as much as you like, but they're not going to go as planned. And the secret to a successful event is never letting on that it's not going according to plan, because remember, from the guest perspective, everything is happening exactly how you thought it would. So don't get stressed if, a speaker is 5 minutes over. Be generous in the timing in the first place, but don't get stressed and don't let on, because as far as anyone knows, that's how it was supposed to be. So while I encourage you to publish or post a schedule for the guests themselves, you can have it displayed up on a wall or on a PowerPoint, or actually give out a printed schedule for guests. Don't necessarily include the times, because then there are the guests who will also get stressed out if they see things that are 5, 10, 15 minutes over, whereas you can adapt and adjust things accordingly. And as far as they're concerned, everything is going according to plan, and it is on schedule. So the slide that you see now in front of you is how Meal Exchange brought a bunch of these ideas together around the event coordination. Up in the top left of that, you see one of our staff members who is getting her hands dirty. She coordinated this entire event, which was a picnic and barbecue for all of our volunteers, which are students and youth who spend their time year-round working on food issues in their communities. And they get together, for an annual conference, which we combine as a massive volunteer recognition event. So we bring together our donors, our alumni, our board members, our national volunteers, anybody and everybody who makes Meal Exchange happen to come and celebrate what the students do. And then we put the students at the center of the stage, which is at what you see on the right, where they, it's the first time a lot of them have met, and we ask them to get together, create a story around, what they've learned, in their own community around food issues, and put on a skit. So they're up there, they're having fun, they're just like being silly, but sharing what they've learned around food issues and hunger and poverty. And then the final piece of that is we recognize some of them as, chapters of the year and volunteers of the year. So that's in the bottom left. We're presenting some photos, and it's a fun, informal activity because we work with youth. A barbecue in a public park where we sourced all of the food from local vendors, and it was all seasonal because we're a food organization. Combined all of these things, people knew it was happening. They were invited. Our guests, like our donors, understood the importance of this. So did partner organizations. And so in total, we had probably about 150 people attend, and we used Eventbrite to check people in and see who was RSVPing and promote it. And it just creates a really positive experience for everyone involved, and people are tweeting photos from it, and sharing it on Facebook about what's happening. But again, really fun and informal, it's part of our organizational culture, and we try to live and breathe it, like when we do volunteer recognition. So where I'm going to leave is that, the event itself is great, and you have a lot of time, and to enjoy yourself there. It's not over when everybody leaves. The final piece is the follow-through. And that, to me, this is almost as important as the event itself, after your guests have left, within 1 week of the event, just to show that you're an organization that can turn things around really, really quickly, you send out those thank you emails and cards, to all of the guests. So if if you're email heavy, you can send it out via email just saying, hey, thanks, it was great seeing you, thanks for coming out to support our volunteers and the work that they do for the organization, or send an actual card out to them. Handwritten cards are so rare these days for anyone that you do that and people really take notice. Provide an event summary for everybody that wanted to attend but couldn't. Post it on your website, on your blog, on Facebook, and let people know about what happened. If you recognize somebody or if a volunteer gave an amazing speech about why they spend so much time with your organization, share highlights of that so that anyone who wasn't able to attend gets a flavor of what it was that happened. Send out a press release to local media announcing it as well. Hopefully a few of them will actually pick up the story and say, hey, this organization celebrated their volunteers. It increases your profile, and when people are looking to volunteer, they'll think, wow, that's an organization that does a really good job and does meaningful work, and sounds like their volunteers have a great time doing it. So I'd like to help out with that. And include the event summary in your next newsletter. The final step of all of it is, hopefully this won't be your last volunteer recognition event, so convene that team of amazing people that help make it happen and write your recommendations for next time. What would you do differently? What were you really, really happy with? What challenges did you face? Keep it very simple. Don't worry too much about well, this was delayed by 5 minutes, so maybe we should do this next time. Just focus on those things that you're really proud of and what you do differently next time. Finally, how to maintain your sanity throughout the entire process. Test things, arrive early, make sure that things are happening okay. Remember to eat. I've noticed with event people, that's the number one thing that they always forget to do. They're running around, they're trying to look after everything, make sure every T is crossed and I is dotted. Make sure that you eat, take a breath, make sure that you and your team are being fed and enjoying yourself. And lastly, the best tip I can leave is just breathe. Expect the unexpected and realize that when things don't go according to plan, it's not the end of the world, because you and your team that helped organize are the only ones that know that this wasn't supposed to happen. So roll with the unexpected, incorporate it into the event, and you'll find yourself smiling and enjoying yourself and having a great time. And at the end of it, everybody will be extremely happy, and they'll walk away going, wow, that was absolutely phenomenal. For more information on this presentation and other tips on how to recognize volunteers and how to engage them in your organization, check out nationalvolunteerweek.ca, and you can share your volunteer recognition stories and ideas on the Volunteer Canada Facebook page, facebook.com/volunteercanada. Thanks for watching, and take care.